Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. The Institute on the Constitution, the American View of the Constitution course, uses primary source documents like Webster's 1828 dictionary in its teachings. So I thought it would be interesting to look at the definition of property from the 1828 dictionary from Webster. So the definition of property: the exclusive right of possession, enjoying, and disposing of a thing, ownership. In the beginning of the world, I'm still reading from the definition. In the beginning of the world, the Creator gave to man dominion over the earth, over the fish of the sea, and the fowl of the air, and over every living thing. This is the foundation of man's property in the earth and in all its productions. Prior occupancy of land and of wild animals gives the possessor the property of them. The labor of inventing, making, or producing anything constitutes one of the highest and most indefeasible titles to property. And it goes on a little bit from there. Quite a definition. But from that definition, we can grab a few things. First of all, the principle of property ownership originates with God. That's a pretty important first step. And God gave man dominion over his property, which is ruling and governing and replenishing their property. And because their property is exclusively owned by them, the government does not have any authority to charge taxes on it. And from that perspective, we can come to understand that property tax, inheritance tax, eminent domain, Endangered Species Act, EPA mandates are all illegal and unconstitutional. So I'm going to close out with a little comment about a loyal title. And again, Webster's 1828 dictionary defines a loyal as a freehold estate, land which is the absolute property of the owner, held in absolute independence without being subject to any rent, service, or acknowledgement to a superior. And most of the land in the United States does come within a loyal title, whether we know it or not. So property tax relief is in the news a lot right now, and so I'm going to welcome Mike Levine in, and we can discuss that. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Chuck. Thank you
So
for
we've
your opening comments there. It has my brain reeling.
so we're talking about tax relief, not the elimination of property taxes, but tax relief. And I guess we've got a House bill out there, maybe even a couple of them that we're going to be talking about this morning. HJR 207, Finance and Taxation, Section 6, Homestead Exemption. So, well, where we are right now, where are we right now regarding tax exemption? You want to give us a little overview of where we stand prior to the legislation?
Before I do that, I'd like to have a little more in-depth discussion over your opening comments. Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, please.
So imagine this, right? In 2001, I bought 10 acres over in south of Claremont in the Green Swamp, right? And I had a guy come over. He bought 10 acres, a couple of rows back from me. And I was sitting out in the middle of my 10-acre undeveloped lot with my legs crossed, chewing on a piece of grass. And this guy comes over and says, "Hey, are you the owner of this property?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he said, "Well, I'm thinking about buying the 10 acres behind you, a couple rows back, Do you mind if I do XYZ on that property?" And I told him, I said, "You know where the property line is? Let me walk you over here and show you where the property line is. This is the property line right here. If you're inside the property line, then you're going to do what I say. If you're outside the property line, then you're going to do whatever you want with your property. Okay. That's the way it works. So, my point to you in giving you that analysis to help frame up our thinking on this subject is, really and truly, Chuck, it goes to the whole concept of limited government, right? If the sheriff has a problem with you and you're living on your little 10-acre lot out in the country, his cars ought to pull up to your property line and he should have very little to talk to you about, right? If you haven't committed a crime of a very limited nature, of, a very few crimes, right? Then the sheriff should just leave you alone. You're on your property. And this is what you're talking about. And this is what the world loves about America, because America has transitioned so far away from, I think you used the word allodial or something,
Yeah,
ownership, which means absolute dominion. That's the
that's what
that's
it
the word I love.
that's what it
Dominion
means.
over your property, right? Right? I mean, you know, all the birds and the frogs and the foxes and the coyotes and all the stuff that's on your land belongs to you, right? And we
At
are
least while
so
it's
far away
there.
from that. Can you imagine? Now, I'm going to close with this concept, then we can move on to the legislation, Chuck. How about
Sure.
close with this concept? This is why people want to move to America, because they want to have, as God intended, they want dominion over their property and over their lives and over their families. That's what America stood for when our founding fathers distributed the Declaration of Independence around the world and wrote the Constitution for this great nation, which is such an abomination to what our founding fathers intended, Chuck.
Yeah. So
Ah,
here we so here we are. We're
I
talking.
believe that is true.
There we go. There we go. The it is kind of interesting that we started this national dialogue on property tax, like eliminating it. And the major legislation we sit here looking at is far from eliminating property taxing. It's just a matter of giving us a little more relief from the property tax. That's it's a hard thing to go from eliminating property tax to what we're going to be talking about this morning.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to take you out on, there's an old real estate trainer, one of the best in history. His name is Floyd Wickman. And Floyd Wickman teaches real estate agents to take their clients out onto a safe island, which means that you inform your client about everything you're going to talk about inside of this conversation, right? Now the client is comfortable because they know exactly what the context of it is. So that's what you and I are going to do right now. We're going to go out onto a safe island, right?
Okay.
And talk about the because again, I'm in the real estate business, as you know, and I've been involved in discussions about property taxes for 30 years, Chuck. And I'll just
Yeah.
kick this back over to you and we can start getting into the legislation that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, I think we mentioned earlier that realtors love reducing property taxes. That uh, a fair,
Everybody does, Chuck.
yeah. There you go.
Everybody does.
There you
There's
go.
not a single person, like, for example, what you just said is so true, right? Because basically what happened here is that the DeSantis administration threw red meat chum in the water to the base. And you know that. I mean, the people are so, last year at the Republican Liberty Caucus lobby days in Tallahassee, we were talking about this last year, okay, about eliminating property taxes. And I made just a comment in the room with about 110 people in the room, all activists, right? And I said, well, you do understand that that is a regressive tax. If you eliminate property taxes and replace the revenue with sales tax, then poor people pay more taxes and rich people pay less. That is called a regressive tax. Okay. And the people in the room, all property owners, were outraged that I would even insinuate that there was anything negative about eliminating property taxes, which I'm for, by the way. I'm for it. The question is, every time you pass legislation, especially associated with taxes, right? There's beneficiaries and there are people who are damaged, right?
Correct.
So if you eliminate property taxes and add a sales tax, which has nothing to do with the legislation we're talking about here today, but that's
Correct.
what's going to have to happen. The revenue is going to have to come from somewhere. If you like these beautiful roads that we build in Florida, um, and people who spend a higher percentage of their income every month pay more sales tax, transaction taxes as a percentage of their income than people who have uh, a higher percentage of disposable income. That's just the way it works. Okay. So the idea, because this is how my point is that there's no one in Florida, sadly, even people who don't own property probably would say, that's a good idea, even though they're going to foot the bill for it. Right. Um, but there is not a political constituency, Chuck, that opposes lowering or eliminating property taxes. There is not a constituency. This is why I said that the DeSantis administration threw red meat, chum in the water to the base, because that's what the root of this is about, Chuck.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and talk about again, where are we right now before this legislation? Just a brief overview of the existing homestead tax exemption deduction.
Okay. So basically, today, residential property owners who enjoy the benefits of the homestead tax exemption, uh, basically, they their the property appraiser comes up with an assessed value of the property. Okay. And then the first $25,000 of value is not taxable. And then later, we passed an additional exemption that said the amount of money between 50,000 and up to 75,000 is not taxable. Okay? So that means that if you have a property that's worth $250,000, you get a $50,000 tax exemption. So you only pay taxes. The taxable value on the property is 200,000. Okay. So even then later, not too many years ago, there was actually legislation. It's included in the 9-page bill, engrossed bill. We can explain that another time. But now that $50,000 is adjusted for inflation every year, Chuck. And they have an index and all that kind of stuff to tie the original rate to a certain index from 1968 or whatever it is. And then, so it basically, as long as inflation is positive and there's no deflation, because they don't want to reduce your exemption, they only want your exemption to go up. So they give you a annual adjustment to the 50,000 for inflation, Chuck. And that's basically how your homestead tax exemption works today.
Okay, well, that hopefully there's someone out there that benefited from that. Moving along here, so what are a few things that the new legislation, and we're talking about HJR 207, I think I mentioned that a minute ago, but just to remind people, that's the bill
So
we're
just to
talking
be
about.
clear, HJR, House Joint Resolution. Okay. So I believe both chambers, the House and the Senate, are looking at the same bill. Okay.
Okay,
HJR. Mm-hmm.
okay, good.
So
So,
anyway, you want me to get into it?
yeah, yeah. What are they proposing here?
Well, again, and keep in mind, as I was going through this, and you were too, Chuck, there's actually, if you take a look at that bill on the Florida House website, it'll say here's some other legislation that's filed that's similar. So basically, you've got a bill 201, 203, 205, 207, 209. So there's a lot of legislation floating through committees that address property taxes because we've made it such a huge deal in the state. This is a huge deal. I mean, if we had no property taxes, we'd have to do, it'd take a lot more than a half an hour to go through the impact of having no tax on homesteaded property in the state of Florida. I mean, if you think people are moving to Florida now, wait until they find out that if they move to Florida, they won't have property taxes on their primary residence. That'll be, I mean, Katie, bar the door, you know. So, but anyway, this particular bill, 207, says that in addition to the property tax exemptions I just described, then um, the rest of the assessed value would get an exemption of 25% of whatever it is. Okay. So if you have a property that's worth, let's use 250,000 again, and you get $50,000 exemption for the first and third 25,000, then you have $200,000 left over. And that particular legislation says you're going to get an additional credit of 25% of the 200, which would be another 50,000. So if your property is assessed for 250,000, we keep the exemptions the way they are. Plus we add another 50,000 to the exemption, which means you'd have a $250,000 property, you'd have $100,000 exemption. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess there's
So the
nothing wrong
question
with
is,
that.
do you like that or not? Are you for it, for or against, yay or nay, right, Chuck?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Um,
And that goes back to your original comment that the Realtor Association understands that everybody's in favor of tax reductions. So the
right.
question becomes, if it is a net decrease, whatever the tax legislation says, if it's a net decrease in the amount of tax that homesteaded property owners pay, it's going to go, and of course, as you pointed out earlier as well, Chuck, the audience needs to know that taxes are dealt with in the Constitution of the state of Florida, not in the legislature. And of course, the legislature has the power to put constitutional amendments on the ballot. So that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the legislature drafting a proposed constitutional amendment that will have to be voted on in the November 26th ballot, Chuck.
Correct. So we're not looking for this reduction anytime soon. Um, Now, there
Well,
are a
yeah, you
couple.
would. You'd get it. You'd get it soon. Mm-hmm.
Well, 26 is when they would
So you're
put
talking
it on the
27,
ballot.
right?
So would
26 is like next week, Chuck.
Yeah, I know, but it won't be on the ballot till November of 26, right? And
Yeah,
so
I
it
mean,
wouldn't.
it's not, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So
True.
you're talking
Mm.
27, and at the earliest, I guess. So there are a couple other
Another
little.
point, Chuck. Go ahead. I think you're
Okay.
heading the same direction I am. Forgive me
Well,
for interrupting you. Go ahead.
no, I'm moving on to the next thing in the bill. This says HJR 207 prohibits local governments from reducing spending on law enforcement, and even though that revenue could be increased or the deductible can be increased. Obviously that kind of makes sense, but does that just kind of put some pressure on the local government?
Absolutely. This is another situation where, for example, I listened to a debate where our CFO, Blazing Golia, was on platform with a couple of academics from Miami and a previous state senator. And the state senator said that eliminating property taxes on homesteaded property was Ron DeSantis creating a nightmare for the next governor, and of course, washing his hands of it because he'll never have to deal with it, right? He won't be the governor of the state of Florida in 2027. So basically, the senator said this is, that eliminating property taxes on homesteaded properties isn't a program or a policy, it's a bumper sticker.
Yeah, right.
Because that's what it is. I mean, there's
Right.
no there's no plan for either reducing spending to meet the revenues that are coming in locally. Of course, the state doesn't care. The state passes unfunded mandates and requires local government to spend money on things and not fund it from state revenues. It's called an unfunded mandate. They do it all the time. So now this is the opposite. This is the flip side of that, which is, look, we're now going to not, we're already controlling your expenses, but now we're start controlling your revenue at the local level. So that's another, again, you can say, that all power is vested in the state, because it's true, because the state authorizes counties and cities to exist, which is true. But in the state, I mean, what's the point? Okay, why have municipalities and why have county governments if the state is just going to, every time the county does something the state doesn't like, the state is just going to basically just override the county. And now the county people are having to manage these budgets and navigate the landmines that are in the legislative controls over the way the locals raise money and spend money, Chuck.
Yeah, so what we're kind of bashing around here is the idea that, yeah, we would all love property tax relief, but property tax relief without a similar reduction in government overhead, really all it does is shift everything around and just cause other problems. Um, is that a reasonable assessment?
Chuck, I'm starting to miss my 10-acre lot in the Green Swamp.
Well, there you
Because it
go.
was really nice out there. Yeah.
Not,
Everybody kind of, it was interesting. I did have some, that's another story for another time. But uh, yeah, I mean, that's what's going on here. And, we've got to get real. This is what government doesn't like to do, Chuck. Government doesn't like to get real about the money. And the blessing that we have in Florida is that we literally bring in so much tax revenue that the state government literally doesn't know what to do with it all. They give away money up there like it's going out of style. And if you're connected in Tallahassee and you set up a 501c3 or some nonprofit organization or some non-governmental organization, or you have some aspirational cause, you can get checks from those guys. I mean, I'm just saying that they spend money like it's going out of style, right? And then, with all due respect, then the CFO, Blazing Golia, wants to come into the cities and counties and give the cities and counties a hard time over spending, right? I mean, the hypocrisy is off the charts.
yeah, there you go. Well, we've got a little bit of a comment here. I'm going to go ahead and try to read it from Stephanie W. We need to move towards a fair consumer type tax, not property tax on your homestead. Save money by reducing bloated government salaries. We need to force our government agencies to become more efficient and effective. The greed went too far and it needs to be pulled back. So that's from Stephanie W. Do you have any comments on
Stephanie's
that?
awesome again. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that, and you know, generally speaking, for sure. And don't forget that in Florida, and keep in mind the hospitality industry is huge in Florida, and we do have the benefit of tourists covering quite a bit of the cost of operating the state of Florida. So Stephanie's point is well taken. And I really think that we should go back to basics and kind of reinvent taxation here in Florida. Because again, keep in mind, everybody, a lot of people spend their entire life building economies in other states and other countries, and then they want to move to Florida when they're done. And all of these homestead and tax exemptions would apply to them too. Okay. So I'd really like to have a discussion, or because I'd be really putting myself out on a limb to say what I'm thinking, but do we really want to waive homestead? Do we really want to waive property taxes on homesteaded properties that's occupied by retirees who move into this state from outside of the state and never hit a lick? to build the state. I'm interested in people who, went to went to school here, worked here, created the economy, put blood, sweat, and tears into it. Those are the people I want to protect. I'm just going to say it. I'm not as interested in protecting property taxes for retirees who move into Florida from other states. Chuck, I think we need to deal with that. What
Yeah,
do you think?
I was actually in a couple of different meetings from individuals who had ideas on property tax reduction, and I thought a number of them were pretty interesting, but I don't see any of that in this particular legislation. And one of them was the idea of reducing the property tax based on how long you've had owned your property. So someone who had lived in Florida all their life would probably very, very quickly put themselves in a position where they wouldn't have any property tax, but someone who recently moved in because they just retired would be paying full boat for a while. I thought that was very interesting, and I'm just wondering if maybe somewhere along the line that could be addressed. Certainly, it's not being addressed here in this bill. And then there's a CSCSH JR 209 that we wanted to quickly discuss. We have a few more minutes, which is a little bit different. Uh, and I guess the main or the first thing that is different about this is that it does cap the homestead exemption at 250,000. So, is there anything in particular you want to stress about that?
Well, basically, you're looking at $1 million property, right? If you take the first 50,000, and then you have the 200,000 additionally, which would meet the cap, and you said, okay, mark up to 200,000 by 25%, that would be 800,000. So you're basically saying that properties at 850,000 or less, over 850,000, no longer get the benefit of the exemption, which is, I'm good with that. You
Yeah.
know, but I want to say about what you said earlier about scaling down property taxes for the length of time that a uh, primary resident owns their property. Just like the homestead tax exemption is portable, that would need to be portable too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that you don't, because again, especially the realtor community and mortgage people and people who make money off of housing want people to move.
Yeah.
And the state of Florida, of course, don't forget, they get paid transaction taxes. So if the benefit wasn't portable, then you'd have less transfer of property, and you would take the state of Florida take a big hit on documentary stamps on the deed and mortgages and intangible taxes and stuff like that, Chuck.
Yeah, that was addressed at the meeting. And then another issue, again, in our closing moments, um, another difference is that it grants the homestead tax exemption only if the homestead property is insured by a multi-peril property insurance policy as defined by general law. Can you give us a little bit of an idea what multi-peril property insurance is?
We really
Is
shouldn't have put this off to the end. Okay. This is a big deal. So basically, instead of paying property taxes, we're going to pay taxes to insurance companies who are now responsible for rebuilding the state of Florida after natural disasters. Okay. I mean, basically, you're underpinning the property and casualty insurance industry, right? Which is honestly, if I was a legislator, I could not vote for any bill that has that in it. I mean, that would be what do they call it? A, a, a
Rich,
poison
Rich,
pill. There you go, poison pill. Yeah, I could never vote for legislation that tied property tax exemptions to purchase of another product, which is insurance, Chuck.
there you
That
go.
would be a hard no for me.
Sounds like a real giveaway to the insurance companies for sure. Well, we are
You're
at our
really
close.
you're shifting the responsibility
Yeah.
of uh, funding the cost of natural disasters to these insurance companies, which you could argue is a fundamental purpose of them. But the price of your insurance is going to go up. It could exceed the price of the tax, right?
You never can tell. Well, again, we are on our closing moments. Why don't you give us a final comment on HB 207 and 209?
Well, my comment would be that there's a lot of other iterations of these people addressing property taxes. But the fact of the matter is, I guess you got to get it onto the ballot as a constitutional amendment on the ballot. So I guess that's the effort. We're trying to, frame this up so that the legislature can agree on what the constitutional amendment is going to look like or how it's going to be proposed. So I think you're going to see a lot of this horse trading while we wrap up committee weeks here, and then we get into the legislative session. You'll see probably further adjustments to it, and depending on um, which special interests are involved, it could go down to the wire to the close of session before you actually have bills coming out of committee and getting to the floor. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of a hot potato this becomes, Chuck.
Well, great. Thank you, Mike. And thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. So until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump. And God bless America.